In trying to understand where chapter 10 of Revelation falls in the chronology of things, we need to pay attention to the details. And let's just read chapter 10. You'll come to an understanding of what it's about. And as we do that, we can point a few things out. Now, first of all, there's a celestial sign. Now, this we're going to go into more detail after we get some of the chapter understood first. But this, you will find, is a celestial sign, and we can locate this, and it tells us what time, what the date is when Revelation 10 is beginning. Let's look at the details first. He had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth. You get that picture of the angel, and it's this mighty angel that came down from heaven. Often it's Gabriel. Gabriel shows up for Daniel, related to prophecies that are all related to Jesus, like Daniel 9. Gabriel shows up in the birth narrative to visit with Zacharias and visit with Jesus' mother Mary. And so if I had to guess who is this angel, this mighty angel, it would be Gabriel. The picture here of his hand on the little book that's open, I would say represents the Bible. So he has this little book, it's the Bible, and it's opened up. And now he projects this image with a right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth. He cries with a loud voice as when a lion roareth. And usually you will think of this lion roareth. Jesus returns as a lion. The whole book of Revelation is about the return of Jesus, the revealing of Jesus. And so when you see a lion roaring, we think of Jesus as the lion of the tribe of Judah. You're not seeing the lion, you're hearing the lion. And so this is a clue that this is related to Jesus on the move, right? The lion is roaring, and he can't see him yet, but you can hear him, right? So he's up and about, and he's on the move. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Then 7 thunders uttered their voices. And so this is a different set of voices, the voices of the thunders. And the voices are the verbiage that tells John what the thunders mean. But when they had finished, and John was about to write down in verse 4 what the voices said, another voice comes from heaven. Okay, so you're going to keep track of all the different voices. The voice of the angel, the voice of the thunders, and now this is the voice from heaven, saying unto me, seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. And so this is puzzling. How are we supposed to understand anything if they're sealed up and they're not written? Now, they may not be written here in this chapter, right? But they are written somewhere. And it's telling you they're written in the little book that's open. And he's reading out of the little book that's in his hand. And so, well, that's the Bible. So it's telling you, you're not going to see them listed here as to what they are. But if you open your Bible, you can find them in the Bible. And so that's a major clue. So we can know what these 7 thunders are. We just have to find them in the Bible. The angel which I saw standing upon the sea and upon the earth, what does he do? He lifts up his hand to heaven. So now you have to picture what the angel is doing here. He's on the beach, say, right? 1 foot is in the seawater, 1 foot is on the land, and now he lifts up his hand to heaven. So he has an appendage in each of those three elements, the heavens, the sea, and the land. Where in the Bible do we first get an idea of those three things all together in one verse as a group? That's where we need to go in the little book to understand and begin to understand what the seven thunders are and what this chapter is all about. And so let's continue on and gather the facts, right? And then we'll start looking around. And swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are therein. So that's the heavens. He's got lifted up his hand to heaven. And it's talking about, I'm swearing by God, who created the heavens and the things that are in the heaven, like the birds, and the earth and the things that are therein, like the trees and the grass, and the sea and the things which are therein, like the fish and the whales, that there should be time no longer. Okay. Now, the revelation is about the revealing of Jesus. And so we might think time no longer is like when Jesus returns, for example. There's no more time because Jesus has arrived. But it's saying delay. There's no more delay. A thing which went on formerly, whereas now a different state of things exists or has begun to exist. Time for something is going to finish. A thing is going to end, and a new thing is going to start. So it doesn't mean that there's not going to be any more time. Time will continue. Events in time are going to continue. But there's something that exists in time is going to finish. And that thing is going to have no more time. Okay, so that's an important element here. We're going to run into this when we look into that little book. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, okay, so now this chapter 10 is speaking about the seventh angel. When he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished. And the seventh angel is in chapter 11. So it's telling you that this chapter 10 is pointing to the seventh angel. And that seventh angel is here. And what occurs here is the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord. So when you go back to chapter 10, it says, the mystery of God should be finished. Well, what does the mystery of God should be finished have to do with the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord? Okay, so the kingdoms of this world are finished. Now, the kingdoms of our Lord, right, will begin. Right? So if Jesus is going to be the king of the world, so the mystery, which is the question, when will Jesus return? Well, Jesus returns on the seventh angel, right? So that's pretty clear of what happens on the seventh angel. Jesus returns, and the mystery of God is finished. We don't have to wonder when he's going to return, when he has returned. So that's just like saying on the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, Jesus will return. And Jesus will be present on the earth. And then, and the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. Well, that's a description of the Bible. The Bible is a sweet book. It's full of wonderful knowledge of God, right? But it's also filled with judgments and on the unbelieving and the evil and the sinners. And it's full of times in which Israel gets destroyed, and prophecies that are not happy times for the nation of Israel. And so in those ways, it can be very bitter to the belly. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was in my mouth, sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. The ability to prophesy, right, is you've received the word of God in order to have a prophecy of God, right? So here he's eating the little book. This is another way of understanding, because it's talking about right after he eats this little book that he must prophesy. That's a clue that the little book is the Bible. And this revelation will be one of the major things that John prophesies. All of Revelation is prophecy. And so the revelation, obviously, is part of the Bible, and he eats the little book, and he's equipped to now prophesy. And that's what he's doing with this writing of this revelation, and the fact that we're reading it, we're receiving his prophecy. And so now we want to find out where to go in the little book to find some of these understandings of what Revelation 10 is supposed to be all about. Now, we know that there's going to be a time no longer. But the time no longer is a time that's no longer for the dominion of mankind. Because when their dominion is finished, then the dominion of Jesus begins. So it's time no longer for the dominion of mankind, right? So it pointed us to this seventh angel, where we could see time no longer for the dominion of mankind as the time of the dominion of Jesus takes over, right? So that helps us to know what the time no longer refers to, right? And so when we can confirm this, because when we see the 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the land, and the hand lifted up in the air, and we saw those three things as a group, and we're seeing the dominion of mankind that this pointed us to the seventh angel, we can go back into the little book, right, that is open. So let's open the little book, because it's telling us we don't need for these things to be written, because we're going to learn about them from the little book. And so here's our little book. Genesis chapter 1 tells us that God made man in his image and after his likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish, right, all the things in the water of the sea, and over the fowl, all the things in the air, right, and over the earth, and all the things that are on the earth, like cattle, right, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So here we see all the things that mankind received dominion over. This is why he's got a foot on the earth, a foot on the sea, and a hand in the air. And he's talking about these things. And here we see where God gives this dominion to mankind. And in the Revelation 10, it says there's going to be time no longer for this dominion here. Now, we can see this a little more explicitly when we look at Genesis chapter 6. Because here God says, my spirit shall not always abide, right, live with man, which really means mankind, right? Mankind. And so God is not, now, God doesn't say that he's not going to strive with a single person. And he set his days at 120 years, okay? God doesn't have a problem dealing with an individual for more than 120 years. And we know that people have lived well beyond 120 years. And so Jean Calment, a female of France, age 122 years, 164 days, died August the 4th of 1997, born February 21 of 1875. So it wasn't very long ago, 30 years ago, somebody lived till age 122. So if God says that he's not going to strive with anyone beyond 120 years, and yet people continue to live beyond 120 years, then his word is not very good. And there's nothing wrong with his word. His word is good. What's not good is the way people commonly understand this verse. The type of years is what's being referred to. It's 120 yovels. See, a yovel is the 50th year of a jubilee. That particular year is called the yovel. So it's 120 yovels, right? And he's referring to all of mankind. I'm not going to always strive with mankind. I'm going to limit the years of all of mankind together to be 120 times 50 is 6,000 years. And we understood this because God's creation is through the first 6 days, which represent 6,000 years. And God rests on the seventh day, which is the 7,000th year. And Jesus' dominion, his millennium, is the seventh day for 1,000 years. When Jesus returns, that millennial 1,000 years begins. And the dominion of man has ended at 6,000 years. And the dominion of Jesus begins on the 7,000th year. So here is the actual literal verse that gives you the literal time that God will have a firm cutoff at a very specific point in time, down to the hour, really, right? Where he's not going to strive with mankind any longer. And his son will pick up the ball. The seven thunders, they uttered their voices, has something to do with a period of time in which the dominion of mankind ends. This part is a little bit hard, because how do you know exactly when this ends? When Jesus dies on the cross, his return is 2,000 years after the year he dies. So he dies 27 AD, and so he's going to return 2027 AD. Now, one of the places, the easiest and quickest place to see where does Jesus return is in Genesis 8. And in Genesis 8, we have a picture of the days of Noah. And we're not going to go through the prophecy of Noah and his days in its entirety, but just know this, that when Jesus returns, his feet must touch Mount Olivet. And he says he returns, the angels tell the apostles during the ascension that he returns just the same way and meaning to the same place as they saw him go. And so he returns, and his feet touch Mount Olivet because he was on Mount Olivet when he ascended. In Noah's prophecy, it's an analogy where the ark ascends 15 cubits above the tallest mountain, and then the ark descends until it touches Mount Ararat again, touches earth again. But Noah doesn't exit the ark until much later. It's going to be 7th month after the ark lands. It's going to be the 2nd month, which is in this story November, and it's going to be the 7th and 20th day. So this being a prophecy, God has caused the numbers to be such that the same day that Noah retouches the earth is going to be the same year that Jesus retouches the earth. In Noah's prophecy, the 27th day is our latter day 21st century. The reason we know that Jesus dies on the 27 AD is that Herod dies in 4 BC. Wise men tell Herod, when he asks them, tell me diligently, tell me accurately, right? When did you see the star, right, that represented the birth of the child? They said 2 years ago, a diligent, accurate 2 years ago, which means Herod dies the beginning of 4 BC. Jesus is born the beginning of 6 BC. And that means he's aged 30 by the end of 24 AD. And he has a 2-year ministry, 25, 26, and then he dies 27 AD, right? So you can tell by the age of Jesus, or the date Jesus was born. And just there, we know that Herod died in 4 BC because Josephus records that there's a lunar eclipse, like a blood moon, on the same day that there's a fast day of Adar 13, just before Herod dies. And so the only year that has a blood moon on the fast day of Adar 13 is 4 BC. You can check all the years, and you can look at the Adar 13 of Fast of Purim in all sorts of years in that whole time frame, and only 4 BC there'll also be a blood moon on that fast day. And so that, by a celestial sign, locks in the correct year that Herod died. And then based on the verses, you have the correct time frame for when Jesus was born. And there's only a 2-year ministry because there's only 3 Passovers in the Gospel of John. And so that makes it a 2-year ministry, not a 3-year ministry, right? And so you have to overcome these hurdles to see these time frames and to actually get to the correct year. Now, of course, when you actually look at the sign of when Jesus was born, it's the sign of the first seal of rider on the white horse with a bow. Okay, so in 27 AD, on Passover, when Jesus dies, there's a full moon at her feet, and Jupiter is in Sagittarius, who is the rider on a white horse with a bow, with a crown at his head, which is the center of the galaxy. And Jupiter is located in that constellation, which is being described as the rider on the white horse in Revelation, which is came conquering and to conquer, right? So it has a specific reference to Jesus. Jesus is the rider on the white horse, right? And Jupiter has to be in the constellation, and it is, by the celestial sign, pinpoints that only the year 27 AD is Jupiter in Sagittarius. There's no other year in the whole time frame except that year in which Jupiter is in Sagittarius. And so that pinpoints the year. And so if you go 2,000 years into the future, you come to 2027 as the return year. Jesus died on the cross on the Passover, right? And we have 7 trumpets, which are 7 months, right, that lead up to the very end in Revelation. So the 2,000 years must end at the beginning of the 7 trumpets, right? And what do we find at the beginning of the 7 trumpets? Well, what we find when you go to the beginning, which is chapter 8, you find a half an hour of silence. We find the 7th seal is removed, and then we find the half an hour of silence. Well, what would the half an hour of silence mean? Except that the transition between the dominion of mankind and the dominion of Jesus requires a half an hour of silence, right? And so when you go back to chapter 7, you also find here that there's a holding back of the four corners of the earth, the wind, right? And it doesn't blow on the earth, right? On the sea, right? And on any trees. The wind doesn't cause any trees to rustle, okay? And so, again, all of the elements of the earth. And so you got silence on the earth when the wind is withheld, silence on earth, and silence in heaven. And so there's something major happening where these two chapters are both beginning with this silence. And so we understand that the actual timing of the end of the 6,000 years, when God would cease to strive with mankind, is happening here at the beginning of the seventh thunder. So this is the genealogical, the actual time when the 6,000 years began, and so when they end. And this silence shows how there's no overlap or touching of the dominion of mankind and the dominion of Jesus. And so he separates the two by this little half an hour of silence. But at the same time, the silence is heard, right? So you can't hear silence, but we're constantly hearing noise, right? And so if suddenly the noise all stops, right? We don't hear anything, but that means we notice something. We're going to notice the silence, right? By not hearing noise anymore for 30 minutes. And when that happens, the saints who are aware of the times will be aware of what's going on. And that awareness, that everyone now is going to be aware, and that's why the seal comes off. The seal on the scroll means the scroll can be unraveled and read and understood. So it represents the understanding or the ability to read and then hopefully understand the revelation. And so this means that there's only 7 months left, or 7 trumpets left. It's actually 6 lunar cycles and 7 trumpets, right? But there's a lot that happens during the 7 months, but the beginning of the 7th trumpet is when Jesus returns. And so now you know where the 7 thunder years ends, right? The 7 thunders are not after the trumpets, they are before the trumpets, right? So even though you had chapter 10 made reference, it comes before the 7th trumpet, which is in chapter 11, right? But that doesn't mean that the other 4 trumpets that are in chapter 8, they don't come before chapter 10, right? The 7 trumpets are 7 lunar periods all in a row. Okay? So where does the 7 thunders fit in, right? Well, they don't fit, even though chapter 10 is in between chapters 8, 9, and 11. So it's inserted in between. But it doesn't belong in between. It belongs in front of, right? It's actually after chapter 6, okay? After the seals. Then you have chapter 10. And so, how do we know this? Because we go back to the little book and we go into the story of Jericho. And the story of Jericho is in Joshua chapter 6. And here, you have men of war, and they have to go around about the city once. And it's in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, the 7 priests come before the ark with 7 trumpets on the 7th day. And they go around 7 times, right? So it's men of war, 7 trumpets, and then the Ark of the Covenant follows them, and then after that is the rearward, came after the Ark. This is the people, right? The rearward is the rear guard, and it's all the other people. So that's the procession. And so the armed men are going to be 6 days. And then there's going to be a seventh revolution, which is the first one of the seventh day. So there's 7 days. So the 7 thunders are the 7 days. And it's these men of war stomping their feet, okay, making an intimidating sound. That's what the thunders are, to intimidate the world. And they are birth pangs. Wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, persecution of Christians, wars in Israel, all kinds of Latter-day Saints, the Antichrist, Trump, and so on comes onto the scene, and all kinds of natural disasters, economic disaster. And then once the 7th soldier rotation occurs, then at the end of that rotation is the trumpets that are blown, and they're blown 7 times. Once at the end of each of those 7 rotations that occur within 1 day. So 7 days, 7 years, 7 rotations within a single day are 7 months. 7 years, 7 months. So of course, the 7 thunders comes before the 7 trumpets. 7 years, 7 months. Just as the men of war come before the priests with the 7 trumpets. They're in front. They come before. They're in front, right? So it's telling you. Now, of course, we know this is the structure of Revelation because in chapter 7, the name of God is put on the servants to protect them from the first 4 tribulations. And in the Jericho story, Rahab is protected, but her house is on the wall. So, and all the walls fall down, but her house does not, right? And then they go in and they collect her family, right? So she's ingathered to safety. And she lives through the tribulation, but she's not harmed. And so this is what happens in Revelation 7. And so of course, when all the walls fall down, that's the dominion of mankind are gone, right? So that's the eventual thing that happens on the 7th trumpet, right? But it starts with the 7 thunders, the last 7 years. And then it has the 7 trumpets blowing, just like Revelation has 7 trumpets. So this structure is the structure of Revelation and tells you how to put chapter 10 before chapter 7. When you go back to chapter 10, we know where the beginning of the 7 trumpets are, and we know what happens at the beginning. The dominion of mankind ends, and so we need to confirm that this is correct. And in order to confirm that this is correct, we look at the sign in verse 1 that gives us the date. When we want to find the date, we have the year 2027. We know that Nisan is the first month. We want 7 completed years, right? So the completed years will be 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. 2020 to 2026 completed years will be the 7 thunder years, of which we have started into the 2026, the last year. Now, in the Jewish calendar, the year ends at the end of Adar, okay, which is roughly March. And so it's March of 2027 actually ends the year, ends the thunder period, okay, because we're always dealing with the Jewish calendar. And so, what is this sign? Well, you can see what the sign is here. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. This is going to be a solar eclipse, and it occurs on Thursday, December 26, 2019. It's a ring of fire, solar eclipse. It has an epicenter south of China. COVID is announced to the world December 31st, 2019. So this is what kicks off the birth pangs, seven thunders. And here you can see that the epicenter of the solar eclipse is south of here of China, right? So this COVID came from China, right? And so the solar eclipse is going to be near China. It's going to accentuate China, right? So that's not a coincidence, because this is the correct sign, right? And the event is COVID. And where did COVID come from? China. So that's confirmation, right? It's the 5th of 8 days of the Feast of Dedication of Hanukkah, right? Nothing particularly special there, but Hanukkah happened to fall. It's usually sometime in November or December. In this particular year, it fell right within the same sort of Christmas week. And that happens every once in a while. Here's the sign. It's a solar eclipse, and the verse says he's clothed with the clouds. This is a man riding a horse, and see, he's naked, right? But he's clothed with a cloud, right? That's the Milky Way, right? That white cloud is the Milky Way. And the next thing it says is that, there's the rainbow at his head. That's the center of the galaxy. And the sun is in his face, right? The sun is actually positioned. It's not behind his head. It's in front of his head, right? So the sun is in his face. And there's Jupiter, right? For anything to be a sign, it needs to have Jupiter in it, right? And so Jupiter is present in the constellation. The rainbow is upon his head. His face was, as it were, the sun. And his feet as pillars of fire. Okay? So when this constellation sets, because the sun is located in the constellation, when the sun sets, the constellation sets. And as the constellation is setting through the fiery sunset, right, the feet will go through the sunset. So his feet were as pillars of fire, right? And that's visible as it's going through the sunset. This sign, with all of its elements, it's a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse is related to China. COVID is a world pandemic, which is pestilence, disease, all types of plagues. Kicks off the seven thunders. Now we can see what Jesus says in Matthew 24. Many shall come in my name, and you shall hear of wars, rumors of wars. Don't be troubled. These things must come to pass. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Famines, pestilences, right? That's what COVID is, pestilence. Earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Okay? People will be afflicted, delivered up. Christians killed. Will be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Many will be offended and betray one another, and shall hate one another. Many false prophets shall rise and deceive many, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world, for witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. All right, so now he talks about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And great tribulations, false prophets might deceive the very elect, right? This is referring to the Antichrist. We had described how the little book is the Bible. And the angel cried with a loud voice as when a lion roareth. And when he cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. We understand when the lion roareth, right? It's quite likely Jesus, right? Jesus, we can hear Jesus coming. He's in the vicinity. You can't see him, but you can hear him. Well, this was trying to let us know that since these voices in verse 4, which were the voices of the 7 thunders, were sealed up, we said, well, we're going to find out what they are by looking in the little book. They're sealed up in the Revelation, right? But they're available to know what they are in the little book. And the voice of the lion is heard. And so it should be noticed, right, that when we did go into the little book to find out what these thunders are, we found them in Matthew 24. And in Matthew 24, it's the voice of Jesus describing what the events on the earth will be like leading up to his return, where it's like seeing lightning from east to west. And so, just exactly the way it describes here, these thunders are sealed up, but we're going to go to the little book to find out what they are. And when you do, you're going to find them in the words of Jesus, in his voice, the lion roaring's voice. And that's exactly what happens. We find all the list of items. That's a whole myriad of things. As Jesus mentioned, wars, rumors of wars, etc., etc., spoken of by the voice of Jesus, just as this loud voice was the voice of the lion. You'll know it's me because the lightning will come out of the east and shine in the west when he returns, right? So don't believe in any antichrists. Return, the sign of his coming, will be another solar eclipse, which happens immediately after the tribulation of those days. Okay, so the tribulation of those days are the first 4 tribulations of chapter 8. The sun be darkened and the stars shall fall from heaven. This is a total solar eclipse in Egypt on August the 2nd of 2027. Right? So this sign can be found in the same year that we're talking about. Right?
Now, this is another minor point that I wanted to bring out. When the angel has 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the earth, we can bet that this is the land of Israel. We can bet it's talking about the Mediterranean Sea. It's not trying to have its foot on like a small body of water, okay? Because it wants to refer to all the waters, all the land, all the heavens, right? So the right foot is on a big body of water, the biggest body of water available to the land of Israel. And it specifically mentions the right foot on the sea, right? And the left foot on the earth. Now there needs to be a reason why it's specifying the right and the left foot and their specific locations. And what comes to mind is that if the right foot is on the sea and the left foot is on the land, right, then the angel has to be facing south. It can't be facing north. Right? So the back is to the north, the front is to the south, with the right foot on the sea. Right? And these 7 thunders are the last 7 years leading up to the last 7 months of the return. And Jesus says that the sign of his coming will take place with a solar eclipse. So as it says in Matthew 24, immediately after the tribulation of those days, right, which are the first 4 tribulations that are very destructive, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. So when the sun is darkened and the moon has darkened and not give her light, that's called a solar eclipse. The moon has moved in front of the sun and made the sun dark. Of course, the moon will be dark as well. It's a new moon. And on this particular day, it's August the 2nd, 2027. And I have other video that shows if you slow things down, there's a meteor shower going on at this time, on this day. That's the stars falling from heaven. It's a day that has a meteor shower. And so that helps to solidify that you have the right time. Because there isn't meteor showers, every day in a certain direction of the sky, right? So at this time, there is, just like the verse says. And the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. It could relate to like sun activity, solar flares and things like that. That's the powers of the heavens. This solar eclipse is in Egypt, right? So when he's standing there looking south, right? Well, that's where this solar eclipse is coming from. So he's standing in the direction talking about the 7 years that lead up to the final return, and then the 7 months of tribulations, and then the 4th tribulation goes by, which they start April 7 is the new moon of 2027, Nisan 1, April, May, June, July, 4 months, and then August 2nd is the 5th new moon. And this is where shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. That's the 5th trumpet. It's not the final trumpet, but it's the 5th trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the 4 winds. So this is when the ingathering takes place, right? And for confirmation to know that, right? Because when you go to Revelation chapter 8 and you go to the bottom, you'll see after the 4th angel, you come to before the 5th angel, it's woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. You see, if you've been ingathered, you're no longer an inhabitor of the earth. So the servants are living through the first 4 tribulations, but they've received the seal of protection on their foreheads, right here. And just like Rahab, she lives on the wall, but her piece of the wall doesn't fall down. And same thing with the servants. They don't get harmed, even though they live through those first 4 tribulations. And of course, they're taken up before the 5th, right at the sign of the coming of the Lord. And all of this is couched in a confirmation that this is the sign, because we find the sign of the August 2nd solar eclipse is south, so that the angel is looking forward to the sign that's in Egypt, total solar eclipse.
And so this is how we know when Revelation 10 begins, because of this sign. And we find this sign at the beginning, exactly 7 years before the last 7 months. It's a perfect fit. The sign is located exactly just before these 7 years, 2020 to 2026, because all the other signs tell us the return that begins the last 7 months is 2027. So this just fits like a glove, right? Where these 7 years fit right in behind this verse 1 sign. And so hopefully that answers your questions for now. Chapter 10 is a very pivotal chapter. It's telling us that dominion of mankind is going to end. There'll be time no longer. It points to the 7th angel, when the mystery of God should be finished, when Jesus returns. It tells us a sign of when it's going to begin. We don't have to worry about not knowing what the seven thunders uttered, because we just read in Matthew 24, Jesus already describes what these seven thunders are: wars and rumors of wars and pestilence and famine and so on. It's all those things. They were written in the little book, right? So it doesn't tell us what they are here, but they tell us we went to the little book to find Matthew 24, description of what the seven thunders uttered. We went to the little book to find the dominion of mankind given to him at creation. We went to the little book to find where God explicitly says that he will no longer strive with mankind after 6,000 years, right? We went to the little book to see the story of Jericho, right? That describes the seven thunders coming before the seven trumpets. So this little book here was very important. We don't go into the books of mankind's history to understand Revelation. The Revelation tells us you go into the little book. You go into the Bible to let the Bible tell you what the Bible means. And it does it in a really perfect way. That's the end of chapter 10. The prophesying again, right, is going to happen because this isn't the end. Next, you will have the prophecy of the ingathering and the seven trumpets, right? So there's more. This is saying there's more, right? And it all helps us to understand that chapter 10 has to be placed after chapter 6, right? In between 6 and 7. Okay, I hope that helped a lot as to understanding Revelation 10.